Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. The open southern border has created a threat to American sovereignty and a humanitarian crisis that we haven't seen maybe in our history. It's been referred to by many as an invasion. Our policy and unwillingness to secure the border has created a superhighway for lethal drugs, violent crime, human trafficking, especially of children, and most recently, the influx of Chinese foreign nationals of military age. The transport of undocumented illegal migrants to cities around the country is creating a crisis of poverty, homelessness, and really the destruction of our way of life. And sadly, anyone who suggests that we should close the border is branded as a racist. But nothing could be further from the truth. We simply love America and we believe in legal immigration. And that's why I'm super excited to have JJ Carrell on our show today as our guest, because he's an expert on the border and he's going to help us to see the truth of what's happening. So let me tell you a little bit about JJ. He's recently retired from the United States Border Patrol after 24 years as a deputy patrol agent in charge. He brings an eyewitness in the trenches perspective of what's going on, and he outlines simple solutions to stop the invasion of millions of individuals across the globe from illegally entering America. He's an author of a book called Invaded: The Intentional Destruction of the American Immigration System, and he's unapologetically patriotic. He believes in the greatness of America and our potential and of our citizens. And he's also unafraid to point out that we have corruption within our own government that's destroying the sovereignty of America. So, JJ, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm very passionate about this topic, and I believe the truth needs to get out. So I appreciate this long-form format of a podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I know that you do a lot of stuff, for sound bites, unfortunately, on Fox News and some of the other channels, which, by the way, are great. They're amazing, but this is going to be a format where you're going to be able to expose the truth of what's going on. We're going to be able to have a conversation about that so that people are aware and so that it helps to inform their decisions and maybe even their voting decisions based upon what those policies might be.
Yeah, this is, and I love the podcast format because you're right. On Fox News, or I go to Real America's Voice and all the other television shows, it's about 3 to 6 minutes, and you can only talk about the surface level stuff, and you can't get into the finer details of what is actually happening on the border. And when I say that it is chaotic and it is intentional, and the numbers are staggering once we get into them. And I want your audience, I think this is very important too, Jimmy, is I'm not a disgruntled Border Patrol agent or a government employee. I'm extremely proud of my career in the United States Border Patrol. I was extremely successful. The men and women that I worked with and then that I supervised and worked for me are heroes. So I love what I did and the importance. I just see the blatant corruption and treason within our government. And sometimes I feel like I'm the one screaming in the wind, but I'm going to keep screaming in the wind until my voice gets out there and heard, because we're seeing the intentional destruction of America. And as this discussion goes on, I'm going to lay it out, and I want all your audience to fact check me. Don't take what I said just for gospel, but what I'm talking to you about today is my experience and hard data. This isn't my feelings or what I theoretically think it's going to be. This is what's happening today and what is manifesting right now in our major cities.
That's right. It's interesting because this is an issue that affects every single American. And we're going to get into that a little bit about this idea that we're sending illegal immigrants, unidentified, undocumented illegal immigrants. We're sending them throughout the country. We're going to get to that later. But this is an issue that is affecting every American, that will affect every single American. We talk a lot about how America is a nation of immigrants, and I always push back on that. And while it's true that we've been established because of immigration, we are a nation of citizens, and we're a nation of the rule of law. And so we've got to stop saying we're a nation of immigrants. We're actually a nation of citizens who love America, who agree with the founding principles and values that we have, and are creating something special here. So, one of the things that I had an opportunity to go through your book, I didn't read it all the way through, but I went through and highlighted a whole bunch of things. And I believe it's a must read for every single American. But your title, I love your title. It's provocative. It's provocative. How did you come to say that's going to be the title of the book, that this is an invasion and it's intentional?
Well, I retired 2 years ago. And when I retired, I changed my whole life. My wife and my family and I moved out of the state of California. We moved to South Dakota, which is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. We've since moved to Kansas City, where my wife's from. However, I removed myself from it all because I had lived that world. Under President Trump, we were actually winning for the first time. And then my last year in my career, I was under Biden, and I saw it literally flip on its head. And I saw the destruction. I got out and I would not read, watch, talk to anybody about anything immigration. I just removed myself. But then some people started to find me and wanted to interview me because now I was free. I was unshackled. I could tell really the truth instead of being demoted or put in suspension or whatever. I kind of got dragged back into it. And then my wife said, you really need to write a book. If you want to start your career, your different career, you need to write a book. And I sat down and I thought, I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. And where I got the inspiration, if you will, for the intentional destruction of the immigration system was by Mayorkas, the DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He is really the inspiration, if you will, a lack of a better word, because I find him to be traitorous. I find him to be a traitor to our nation, and everything that he has done is intentional. And when you look at Mayorkas, a lot of your audience will go, well, he's only been there for 2 years, 30 months under Biden. No, this man goes all the way back to President Obama. He was the director of USCIS, which is a huge policy machine inside the DHS and handing out citizenship, etc. And then he became the second in charge under Obama on DHS, and now he is the secretary. If you go back, and in my chapter, I detail everything about him. He created everything that we are experiencing today. He created DACA, prosecutorial discretion. He's abusing the asylum and parole systems that we're in now, the catch and release. What is happening now in the United States Border Patrol and in ICE has never happened. Let me try to explain this because it's hard to wrap your brain around it. Okay, we'll get into the numbers, but I need your audience to understand.
Real quick, let me jump in there. So what you're saying is you're kind of connecting some dots, and I think this is important. Like, first of all, I didn't know this about the history of Mayorkas, and when all of a sudden things become clearer, right? When you start to connect policy dots, you connect his history, the things that he has been working on to undermine our national sovereignty, our national security. That's what's at stake here. He's undermining it. You're saying this is years, this is decades in the making, and now it's all kind of coming to fruition.
Absolutely. And as this conversation goes forward, you will start to see the dots being connected. Either you want to remain willfully ignorant, as a lot of Americans want to do, and I say that without any joy, or you're complicit in this. There's no other, and I always ask this question once I get done having these long form discussions or just with my neighbors. And they ask me, well, what do you think? And I tell them, and they got this shocked look on their face because I try to lay it out for them as quick as I can. And then my final question to everyone is, if what I'm saying is not the truth, then explain to me in a rational explanation why our government has allowed up to 15 million people in 30 months to come into our nation. And they have no answer because there is no other answer except it is the intentional destruction of the American immigration system. And they're using immigration to fundamentally transform America. And you hit on it before. This is not a race issue because you have 195 nations on planet Earth. Over 175 nations are accounted for in the arrest reports in the Border Patrol. Let me say that again. 175 nations out of 195. So the whole world is coming here. Okay. This is a destruction immigration system and creating a world of citizens versus non-citizens. And if you don't think that the demographics are shifting, let me just give you one stat. I'm rarely shocked, Jimmy, but when I read this, I even had to okay, hold on. I had to reread the whole article again. And it's from the Center of Immigration Studies, CIS.org. Impeccable. Nobody even argues with their data. They are like the experts. So they took their head demographer and a head researcher, and they found from the years 2016 to 2021, because the census hasn't come back for 2022, they found the total population growth in America, 77% of the total American growth for those 5 years were to foreign nationals and illegal aliens and their children. So you're looking at one generation, if these numbers continue, that you will actually have a nation of about 600 million people, and you will have more non-citizens than citizens. And no nation can withstand that. We will not be America anymore. You may call it United States of America, but there will be nothing united about us. We will be so balkanized you can't even begin to fathom how balkanized. Yeah. And it will be an upside down world where the wealthy, and us, the extreme poor. There's going to be no in between.
Yeah. Well, and I think so first of all, I've never heard that statistic. That makes me crazy to hear that, honestly. Especially when you consider that most of the people that are coming here are not coming here to make America the best nation on earth. They're actually coming here for free stuff. We're going to talk about that for sure. And they're also undermining, and you can see signs of this in every single other Western country, like France, like the UK. They're being overrun by displaced migrants who have no reason to be there and are now starting to riot against that culture. And hey, listen, I feel like we're within a whisper of that starting to happen here, and you're seeing evidence of it now. And we'll get into that in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about, you said something that I don't think anybody knows. You just said that up to 15 million illegal aliens have entered this country illegally over the first 30 months of this regime. Is that a real number?
It is a real number, and I'll go through it real quick with you. Okay? Right up to this day that you and I are speaking, the Border Patrol and ICE, CBP, has arrested 7 million individuals. 7 million in 30 months. Okay? And these are give-ups. And the vast majority, over 90% of everyone that's arrested is released. I know it's hard to even believe. They're all being released, okay? Now, the vast majority of Border Patrol agents are doing no enforcement operations. They are transporting, processing, and releasing aliens. So right now, as you and I speak, in a 24-hour period, there are hundreds and hundreds of miles on the southern border. Now, remember, we're not talking about the northern border, which is a chaos, and the coastlines, people and drugs pouring in. We're just talking about the southwest border. In the southwest border, you have hundreds of miles where there's not a single Border Patrol agent patrolling. Can you even fathom how vulnerable and susceptible to immense crime and terrorism that the United States of America? And let me give you a very hard number. Under President Trump, and we can go back to that, but under President Trump, we had 50,000 annual overdose drug deaths. Because of the open borders, we are now careening in 30 months into 150,000. 150,000. There's a direct line between open borders and overdose deaths. So when I tell you that the border is completely wide open, I'm saying that we have arrested 7 million. The federal government, and do not believe anything that they say. I'm going to just be honest with you and just say, I'm not a conspiracy guy at all. I believe in facts and data. The federal government lies, manipulates, and changes their data constantly to throw you off, and the mainstream media is in the bag. But they're claiming to have 2 million, we call them getaways, people that jumped the border undetected and absconded. Now, all of my buddies and mine, all my colleagues and sources, we laugh at that number. It's sad, but we laugh at it because we know that number is really about triple or 4 times. Because if you don't, like, let me give you an example. When I used to work in Arizona, I spent my career in San Diego, but we would go to hot spots across the border. There were times where I would drive and I would see 50 yards. We would have these drag roads where we drag tires, little tires, and make the sand like glass. So anything, even ants that crossed it, we would go, okay, there's an ant colony coming across. but I would go through 50 yards of herds of elephant. That's how much foot sign was on it. There's no way to count that. I would just call it in by yards. Okay, look, this is 50 yards, and I have no idea. It could be 500 or 500,000. I have no idea. So the absurdity of saying that the getaways are 2 million, that makes you have to, when you know about government and how they lie, you have to believe that number is so grossly miscounted, and everyone knows it. The rule of thumb is every time you arrest someone, at least another person gets away. And now that's been exacerbated because there are miles and miles and miles, if you can imagine, with not one agent patrolling it. It's frightening. It's frightening. So when I say right now, Joe Biden has allowed in, arrested, encountered, released, and getaways between 12 and 15 million, I anticipate if these numbers stay the same and nothing shows me they're not. In fact, numbers today are spiking and Biden's administration is freaking out. So I believe that when he leaves office, may God help us that he leaves office, he will have let in over 25 million people into America. We're looking at 8 to 9% of the total American population. Think about that.
Unbelievable.
And top of the 30 million illegals that are already here. So we're now looking at 15 to 20% of our total population are illegal aliens and foreign nationals.
Unbelievable.
It's frightening.
And we don't have,
it's frightening, but
it is frightening. It's frightening because we don't know who they are. We have no idea where they are. They're arrested, processed, and released. Many of them now are being dispersed all over the country. They have free transportation anywhere in the country that they want to go. We have no idea, and they're fundamentally changing the communities that they're arriving in. And this is just to set the record straight, because I know you believe in this as well. I am for legal immigration. That is part of our system that makes us great, is that we do accept and receive people that want to be here, that have a legitimate reason for being here. But legal immigration, the legal immigration process in America requires you taking classes. It requires, actually, believe it or not, you learning the English language. That almost no one knows that you have to learn the English language to become a citizen of this country. And you have to take an oath of allegiance to America, to our founding principles, and to the American way of life. When you let in 10, 15, 20, 50 illegal immigrants, they don't have any requirement to become part of America in a substantial way. Isn't that part of this problem?
It is, and I'm glad you brought this up, because the left and the progressives like to say every time that you say, hey, hold on a second, I want to shut this border. I believe in our sovereignty. I believe in law and order. They go, you're a racist. You're a xenophobe. And my pullback is I never, like I'm sure you do, I don't argue the fact that I'm not a racist. It's a worthless argument. What I do point out is, no, I'm making a clear distinction between legal and illegal. Do you know, people don't know this, but we legally let in 1.2 million legal residents into our nation every year. 1.2. Now, some of the greatest citizens of our nation are immigrants that naturalized and became citizens, because they saw the other side of the world, right? You and I, a lot of times, take it for granted. It's like it's like somebody finding Christ for the first time, right? Yeah. They went and took the time, where I just was born into the belief that, okay, Jesus Christ is our Savior. I believe in God. But the people that were not, and they were atheist or agnostic or whatever, and they find God because they researched him. They studied him. Yes. They actually are better Christians in a way than I am, because they know their faith stronger in a more detailed way. Yeah. Same thing with the immigrants. I would come across these naturalized citizens living on the border, and I would roll up on them, and I always knew who was naturalized, because the moment they saw my Border Patrol vehicle, I got out, they were reaching in their back pocket, because what they kept with them, which was fascinating, is they laminated their naturalization documents. They were so proud of it. And they would show me, and I would always do this. Please, sir or ma'am, tell me what that day was like. Where were you naturalized? I was naturalized in Houston. It was the greatest day of my life. I am a U.S. citizen. I am protected by law and order. I love this country. Amen. Amazing. I want more of that.
Amazing. Yes.
But you can't. Yeah. If you want more of that, here's the irony. If you want more than that AOC and Paul Ryan types and Mitch McConnell, then change the law. We're enforcing your law. Yeah. You as Congress has said it's 1.2 million. So I have to stop everyone else that comes across. Now, the argument I have, Jimmy, all the time with crazy liberals and even the rhinos, I say, okay, and this will get to the crutch of what we're talking about. There's about 4 billion people on planet Earth that live in poverty. Let's cut that in half and say 2 million. And they live in abject misery. And they all want to come here. I always tell somebody, we have this discussion. Okay, you tell me how many we're allowed to take. Do we take all 2 billion? No, that's crazy. Okay, well, give me a number. They always come to 20 million for whatever reason. I put this in my book. And I say, okay, you're the king. Boom, 20 million are here. We're gonna make sure that they assimilate and they're taken care of. Now, tell me what you're going to do about the other 1.98 billion that are coming here. They're at our border trying to cross. What are you going to do? And they don't have an answer. They're flustered. And I go, you have to build a wall, right? You have to have law and order, correct? And they're like, I think so. Yes, you're right. Then I said, why is my wall at 2 billion to hold back racists, but yours at 1.98 is morally correct and righteous? You're a hypocrite and you're a liar and you're ignorant. And it's so frustrating because finally someone, Congressman McClintock, who's a rhino from California, but he did ask Mayorkas this question on oath. And he asked finally the question I've always been asked. What number of illegal aliens is going to trigger you to close the border? And under oath, Mayorkas would not answer it. And his silence or refusal to answer it told you everything you need to know. There is no thought process, no law enforcement posture, strategy to stop this at all. In fact, everything that they do, Mayorkas, DHS, CBP, Border Patrol, is to take avenues and open them wider to get as many people as possible. In fact, my old Border Patrol chief, Rodney Scott, testified under oath. They asked him, what was it like before you got pushed out? He's a patriot, by the way, got pushed out by Mayorkas. What was your conversations like? And I'm going to paraphrase, but it's very close to a quote. Mayorkas told me to do whatever I had to do to increase the flow of people into America. Okay, let's stop for a second. That's true. It's under oath. Mayorkas, his main job is to secure the border and provide sovereignty for America. He's telling the premier leader of the Border Patrol to not do his job and to allow people to come in. There's no other way to say it. That's treason. And what is treason? Treason is when you purposely do something to hurt your nation. And he has done it for 30 months. And because our Republicans are so impotent, so incompetent, and so complicit too. They're complicit. They do nothing. They've done nothing.
And you said it. And this is why, we don't take sides politically because we're fed up with all of this nonsense, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And there are some good people in office who are fighting for freedom. There's something in the Congress called the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus is now 48 to 52 people in there, and they are fighting for the things that you and I value, national sovereignty, national security, protecting our borders, freedom, individual rights, property. They're fighting for that, but there are precious few of our elected officials that care at all. And I think one of the things you said, and this is why we know in your book title, it says intentional, the intentional dismantling. Yep. And here's why we know. They're openly saying they want to fundamentally change America.
Yes.
What easier, faster way to do that than to bring tens of millions of people into this country who we have no idea who they are or where they're from? They could be criminals. They could be good people. They could be abusers. There could be 1,000 things wrong with this. But what we do know is the vast majority don't care about America and the American way of life, and they ultimately will rebel against everything that we value. That's the problem. And Mayorkas being, I didn't know this, but now knowing that he has a 20, 30-year run up to this now is pretty disturbing. But I wanted to read something to you. You mentioned this too, and just this idea of we're a nation of citizens. And when legal immigrants come across, they go through all this process. I just want to read a little bit of the oath of allegiance to the United States of America that each one of these naturalized citizens raises their right hand to agree to. And here it is. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have before been a subject to, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And then on it goes. I can tell you this. I want every single natural-born American to declare this oath. I mean, this is incredible. What if we were taught this? What if this was something we were committing to as American citizens? Just like you said, when they come, they show you their laminated papers. They're proud of it because they had to go through something and value the benefit and the blessing of being in America. That's the type of migrants that we want. We want people that want to be here, that are going to contribute in a positive way to our culture.
Absolutely right. But when you take millions of people to come in, you have now taken, I try to give this analogy. Let's say that you're in line at McDonald's and it's lunch, it's busy, right? Or Chick-fil-A, it's really busy. And you're like 50 people deep and you're like, God almighty, please let this go faster. And then 150 people get off a bus and they cut right in front of you. And then they run out of food. And you're like, wait a minute, I was right here. And they all not only laugh at you, they forcibly keep moving you back because another bus comes. So when I talk to people, and I have this in my book, legal residents, legal citizens here are wanting their family to come, or their wives, or maybe their children. They can't because they've been pushed back in the back of the line. Let me give you how insane this is. Because Mayorkas has taken the asylum process and bastardized it. Do you know that they are now into 2030 for the see the judge? In New York City, the docket is full. This is New York City, the gigantic New York City. The docket to see the immigration judge is now booked to 2032. So this is all coordinated. So when you talk about legal immigrants, they're not going to get processed properly. Some of them are already waiting over a decade, but they should have already been processed, but they can't because the system is so polluted and corrupted and broken, nothing can be done. But they break the system. If you go back and you look at the amnesty calls and pushes all the way back from Reagan all the way to today, it's all the same thing. They overwhelm the system, they break the system, and then the people that broke it say the only way to fix it is to flush it, meaning amnesty, and then we'll make some changes but it's never done, right? So when you talk about legal immigrants, they're being a disservice to them, and it is. I'm actually as I'm going through these podcasts and I'm writing my book and I do my research, one thing that continually presses on my heart, and I have to say this, is I believe that our country. Let me rephrase that. I believe that our nation and our government is so morally bankrupt that we are now seeing the manifestation of good versus evil. And you look at every facet of the federal government, state, local, you see corruption, you see lies, you see the immorality of it. And I'm going to point out just quickly an immorality of this immigration system, okay? Because people... When you look at all these people coming across and being released, nobody knows the minutia of how they get released. And then what is the backside, meaning the end of this, right? So what does it look like if I cross, I have a young son. So let's say my wife and I cross and we're from Haiti, and I take my son and I pick up a daughter on the way that's rented to me. So I bring my family in. The government now is paroling me. That's a whole nother subject, but it's illegal what they're doing. So they give me, the Haitian man, and say, where are you going? I'm going to New York City. Here's my address. There's no way to verify this address. So what I give to him is a notice to appear. Okay, it's an NTA, but there's no dates and time on that notice to appear. That's when he's supposed to go in front of the judge. I let him go to this fictitious place, and I tell him, you have to report in 60 days to the ICE office. They never report to the ICE office, or if they do, they can't see an ICE officer. So what happens in immigration legal terms, that family does not present itself in parole time of 60 days. They become out of status and thus become illegal immigrants. Wow. We give them tons of paperwork, but one thing we never give this family that is soon to be legal alien, we never give them a work authorization document. Think about that for a second. I'm sending you out to America. I welcomed you in fraudulently under auspice, and then I let you go. But I don't allow you to work in America. You can't see the immigration judge to 2030. How am I going to support and provide for my family for 6 years? And this is where the moral part that I need the audience to understand. What drives these politicians to do this? The Democrats want votes because everyone that would be amnesty, 99% vote Democrat. They're banking on that. The Republicans are banking on wealth, and they get it because they get it through donations and jobs from the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce runs the Republican Party, and they want amnesty. But what you have done in the meantime is you've taken this Haitian man and his wife, and I want you to times and times millions, not thousands, millions. Mm-hmm. So right now, Jimmy, you have this line, and above it is all the American citizen, naturalized citizens, that naturalized residents that can work legally. You have millions that are slaves that are working without wages that are proper. There's no recourse for anything done to them. It is immoral. We have created a slave class of people in America. And we haven't even started, Jimmy, to talk about all the child sex trafficking, the female sex trafficking, the drugs. Here's an iceberg. We're just hitting the top of it. When you look down below the water at what is happening to America and our founding fathers said our government is us. So we are allowing children to be raped and brutalized. We're allowing women to go into prostitution to pay off their smuggling debts. We're making men work in slaughterhouses for half the pay. Do you think that's the country that our founding fathers said had divine providence when they created the Constitution and Bill of Rights? I dare to have that argument with you.
Yeah, there's no way. And I think what you're spotlighting, and I think this is a good spot to wrap up the first segment, because if you're listening to this podcast and it's not getting you agitated, if you're not feeling a little bit of adrenaline going right now about our immigration policy, the absolute corruption of it, you're not paying attention. But in the second half, we're going to talk about some specifics relative to the humanitarian crisis. I mean, JJ, I love what you just said. You kind of ended the first segment by talking about this is a moral issue. This is a humanitarian crisis that we're creating based on our policy. And we want these people to be absolutely dependent upon the system, because then they're going to want handouts and they're going to vote a specific way. It's disturbing. But in the second half, we're going to get more specific about the crisis that we're creating and then what we can do about it. So, hey, thanks for joining on this first half, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.